Thank you. All right. Let's see. Cool. All right, so let's start with the Heart Sutra. On prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem, thus did he hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on massive Alchan mountains in Rajgir, together with a great community of monks and a great community of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. Hashidani, son of the lineage trained, wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom. He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage, wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom. Should look upon like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition of factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition of factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on up to including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on up to including no aging and death, no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering or origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on the well and perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration, without fear, having completely passed beyond error to reach the aim point of nirvana. All the Buddhas dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment and reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of the great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as the truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhisoha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. When the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you've indicated, even if the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. By accumulations I gather through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. All right. Where's my stuff? It's here. So today we, again, did not cover a lot of distance. I think that we've covered 4 verses. Let's look at the outline. So we're covering the section on the benefits on relying on isolation or seclusion. We've covered the point on companions, place, point of livelihood, and a point of discernment. In the previous week, we also looked during the tutorial at Lama Tsongkhapa's text, this section that explains the 5 or 6 prerequisites for cultivating calm abiding. So one of the points that were made was with respect to the place. So needing to find a favorable place for doing a calm abiding practice. So the place is supposed to be a place where provisions are accessible. There is no contagion or disease that is common in that place. You have good companionship. You're protected from dangers, animals, elements, and so forth. I think that they will mention suitable company, like-minded people that will not be not create disturbances in your retreat. So that's the place, and Shantideva expresses also a similar sentiment. Then, of the points that Shantideva mentioned, he said that you need to have pure ethical discipline. So if you're a monastic or if you're a lay practitioner, pure ethics in terms of arresting physical and verbal non-virtuous actions, which create a certain disturbance in the mind. So arresting them is also a prerequisite for having a practice in which your mind is not on edge or not agitated. To have abandoned many worldly activities, such as, for example, going here and there, doing business, going to work, and so forth. And as we said, you might have a spiritual practice, a daily spiritual practice. You might be a family person, and you still can allocate a certain time in your life for doing meditation and Dhamma practice. But if your main goal is to attain calm abiding in order to combine that with special insight, I think that it'd be very difficult for doing everything else that we do in life, family, kids, partner, job, and so forth. It'd be really difficult to combine that with attending calm abiding. So you can improve your concentration, you can place imprints, you can make your practice better and better. But in terms of creating the prerequisites for a solid practice of calm abiding without actually giving up, at least for a certain duration, on all of those different activities, I think that for most people, it will likely to be the case that they will not attain calm abiding. So giving up many activities, having lesser desire and being more content. So having lesser desire and being more content is what Lama Tsongkhapa says. And here in Shantideva's text, we're looking at different ways in which attachment arises in order to curb down on a sense of desire, in order to be more content. Lama Tsongkhapa also mentions, I think, giving up thoughts of desire. That's also one of the prerequisites, such as, for example, thoughts of, I guess, bank accounts and wanting to make money and what will happen to you next week or next year and so forth. So to give up all those different thoughts for the sake of making sure that your mind is completely amendable for the practice of calm abiding. So here, the structure is slightly different, but we can still combine these two. And in the review questions that I sent out last week, I tried to encourage you guys at home to maybe try to combine Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation with what Shantideva says here in order to just inform our meditation, contemplation, and practice. So we spoke of, in the last couple of weeks, abandoning the class of things incongruous with calm abiding, beginning with abandoning the bustle of the world. And here the bustle of the world refers mainly attachment to outer objects, attachment to other living beings, and also attachment to gain, honor, and so forth. So they're regarded as outer objects. Then outer objects, sorry, abandoning attachment to gain and honor. Inner object, those things which are conjoined with consciousness are considered to be inner, but altogether you can look at objects which are outside of yourself, others, gain and honor, and then objects which are inner, more or less, or things that have to do with you, like, for example, your body. So then in the benefits of relying on isolation, Lama Tsongkhapa continues with dealing with attachment. So discerning antidotes to being attached to body, and also this discerning the antidotes to being attached to those who are dear to your heart. So previously we spoke of being attached to others in general, like, for example, the ones that are close to your heart. So I guess that we're being attached to people in general without necessarily being attracted to the body, or without having necessarily sexual desire. And it seems that here in the second section, in the benefits on relying on isolation, that's the fourth section, it seems that what Shantideva here is dealing with is, it seems that mainly dealing with sexual desire, although he doesn't call it like that. He speaks about ridding ourselves of attachment that we have to our body, and then discerning the antidotes to being attached to those dear to you. But what he speaks about is the things that you find in cemetery, and how it is not logical to be attached to a certain body because it is similar to a corpse. So it seems that I guess that Shantideva was more gearing up to speaking about how to reduce sexual desire, although I guess that you might find someone beautiful or attractive and be attracted to them in one way or another without necessarily involving a great sexual desire. But it seems that this is at least Shantideva's approach. So we've covered today verses 29, from 29 to 32. We didn't speak about verse 33, but altogether, let's say 4 verses, which is not a lot. So let's look at what we've covered today. And there were a few points that I wanted to expand on, or to branch out to. But I think that the verses today were quite straightforward. So what I thought is just probably using more sources in order to inform our contemplation when you put it into practice. So first of all, so we started with verse 28. Having gone to the channel grounds, when shall I deduce that this body of mine and the skeletons of others bear the property of disintegration? This very body of mine will also become so, because of its odor. Not even the foxes will come close to this body of mine. There will come a time when such will happen. So as I was doing some reading at home, I was just, I remembered living in India. We have, I think, more direct access to corpses. Here in our culture, we normally hide corpses, right? So it's rare to find situations where people die at home, where the relatives or the close ones have to have direct contact with the corpse of their beloved one. Many people die at the hospital. Then the team transports a corpse to a refrigeration unit, I guess. And then you have other people that come in and deal with all the cremation things. So it's hard to find a direct contact of most people with a corpse. When I was living in India studying Tibetan, during my second year of studying, I was sharing a place with another German monk and a couple of Tibetan ex-political prisoners. And the deal was that we paid the rent, and their role was to talk Tibetan to us, right? So we paid the expenses, they lived with us, and their job was to just speak Tibetan to us all day long. So that was part of it. Anyway, one of them had epilepsy. And one day we woke up. Then normally all of us would have breakfast together. So we woke up, woke Tenzin and Pasang. These were the 2 Tibetan guys. Actually, Tenzin was away. So we woke up Pasang. Then I was making breakfast. And when breakfast was ready, we came to the common room when Passan was lodging. And he was still lying down. So kind of we called him, he didn't move. Tapped on his leg. His body was completely rigid. And then it turned out that he had an epileptic fit. He was lying on his belly. His face was on the cushion, on the pillow, sorry, and he passed away suffocating. So we tried to resuscitate him, and it turned out to be like a massive drama. You're stuck in India. One of your flatmates is dead, and you have no idea what to do, right? So there's no emergency line. There are no ambulances. We called Delek Hospital. That was the local hospital, and they said, yeah, just bring him down. So it took us a lot of time to get him onto the road, to find a taxi that was willing to take a corpse basically down to the hospital. And then it was funny, his body was so rigid that I was sitting at the back seat and touching the German monk was sitting at the front seat, kind of opposite to me on the other side. The body was rigid, so we couldn't fold him. So the Passan's head was in my lap, and the hands went over to touch him and was sticking out of the window. So we came into the hospital, opened the door, and the doctor came out of the hospital with a stethoscope, put the stethoscope on the chest of Passan and said, yeah, he's dead. Which, I mean, of course, we knew that he's dead. And I said, so what are you doing? He said, I don't know, just take him home and do whatever you need to do. Yeah. So we took him all the way back home. Then I went down to the Tibetan registration office and I said, well, my flatmate is dead and I don't know what to do with that. So I was told at the reception, the welfare office, that I need to go down to Lower Dharamsala to get wood for cremation, then take him down to the cremation ground and just cremate the body. So kind of no police investigation, no records. And he said, just after you cremate the guy, just come back and tell us so that we can cross him off the list, of the register. So, sorry? See you later. Yeah, see you later, kind of. So, so we did that. I mean, it was at home with us for, I think, 3-4 days to do the normal prayers, the Bado prayer and all the other things. Then we took him down to the cremation ground, and there's a guy that is responsible for cremating people. So the pyre was already there with the wood that we bought. Then he took the body and just put it on the wood. And then with very abrupt movements with scissors, it just kind of cut all the cloth, started to rub sugar and oil on the body to make sure that the body burns quickly. And then the body did not fit completely onto the pyre. So it was basically standing on the corpse and with one kind of holding one leg with one leg and just breaking the limbs just to make sure that the body fits into that thing. So it was, first of all, very confronting because we don't see those things normally. We don't see things that lying around either in channel grounds or being prepared for cremation in India in that brutal way. And I think that part of the thing is that we identify the person with the body, right? So when I was looking at the corpse, the body of Passan, in my mind was, this is still Passan. It's not that the consciousness has departed, but I was thinking that it's pretty shocking and gruesome to see something like that being done to someone that you know. But anyway, this is what Shantideva says here. So he says, having gone to the channel grounds, when shall I deduce that this body of mine and the skeletons of others bear the property of disintegration? This very body of mine would also become so. Right? So it's quite confronting to think that one day will be done to us, to me, probably kind of not in the right setting that I had in India, but in a similar way, there would be a corpse. There would be a corpse and nothing else. The person will have already continued. So because of its order, not even the foxes will come close to this body of mine. There will come a time when such will happen. Not only that, when I think of, for example, my parents that passed away quite a few years ago, buried when I try to think of what remains of them, skeleton, probably not more than that. And also the memory of having parents, of course, is still there, but year after year, the details are fading away. And, when I think that probably in 10, 20, 30 years from now, there would be hardly anyone that remember that they even existed. And they will all fade into this distant memory, and that will also occur to us. So currently it seems that, at least it seems to me, that the world revolves around me. And I have this deep sense of care to my body, as Keshla said, and I think that this is also something that we can assess in a daily meditation practice, to think of how much, try to kind of really count how many activities throughout the day are oriented directly or indirectly to take care of the body. Now, so far as, when I think of what I do from morning to evening, waking up, going to the loo, taking a shower, preparing breakfast, going here and there, getting dressed, having lunch, washing dishes, and so forth, going for a walk, doing an exercise. So many different things throughout the day are mainly oriented towards the body. And it seems that this currently occupies the majority of our life. But as Shantideva says, sooner rather than later, it will all be gone. Not only it will all be gone, there would be only repulsive things that might be left from it. So there might be someone that is very dear to your heart, or someone that you just know. When they're alive, you might shake their hand. When they die, most people don't want to even touch a corpse. And the only difference, you could say, in terms of time, is whether that thing has consciousness or does not have consciousness. I mean, I'm not even speaking about a corpse already decomposing to the point in which it becomes disgusting or foul, odor, complexion, whatever. Now, if you have someone that died about an hour ago or 2 hours ago, I think that most people will flinch if they have to touch a corpse. So that also has to do, I think, with, one point that I thought of at home was, it has to do with 4 erroneous apprehensions, which is something that we deal with when we meditate on the 4 noble truths. So I think that we've mentioned before the meditation on the focus placement of mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feeling, mindfulness of mind, and mindfulness of phenomena. And these 4 mindfulnesses are practiced in order to make us understand what we need to do in relation to the 4 truths. So we want to understand what true suffering is. We want to abandon true origins. We want to accomplish or manifest true cessations. And we want to cultivate true paths. So in relation to understanding true suffering and then eliminating true origins, we have the 4 erroneous apprehensions, which can be mainly explained with respect to the body. So while the body is unclean in the nature of suffering, empty and selfless, we hold on to the body as if, first of all, we hold what is not clean to be clean. So we want to touch the body, we want to caress the body, we want to embrace someone else. We have the idea of what is an attractive body, what is not an attractive body. We want to get into a relationship with someone, often based upon the personal experience. So holding what is not clean to be clean, what is impure to be pure, is the first erroneous apprehension. And this meditation on the unattractiveness of the body, in terms of what you find in cemetery, for example, is really helpful in terms of ridding yourself of, or at least reducing this erroneous apprehension. Then holding what is impermanent to be permanent, right? So we hold ourselves to be, I wouldn't say completely eternal, but we don't often think of the momentary change of the body. Every once in a while, when we look at the mirror, we might get a fright or a shock of how much we've aged, in probably with an unstated expectation that that would not happen. often we said also we make long-term plans, thinking that there's a lot of time ahead of us, maybe eons ahead of us, but life is quite brief. So we hold what is permanent to be, sorry, what is impermanent to be permanent. That's a second erroneous apprehension. And again, thinking of what you find in cemeteries and also then comparing it or relating it to your own body is helpful in terms of understanding impermanence. It is said that often yogis, I think that we've covered it maybe last week, that yogis or practitioners like solitary realizers, they get teachings, then they retire and they meditate while every once in a while visiting a cemetery or channeling grounds in order to meditate on their own death and impermanence. Then the third erroneous apprehension is holding what is in the nature of suffering to be pleasurable, but it's also in relation to the body. So the body is in the nature of suffering, in that the body is true suffering. It is pervasive suffering of conditionality, but we hold on not only to our body, but to the body of others as being a source of joy or pleasure and so forth. So of course we can derive pleasure from the body. We do get pleasure and satisfaction and comfort and so forth from the body, but it is not an abode of inherent happiness. It's not a source of happiness. It's actually a source of misery. It is the third type of suffering. So that's the third erroneous apprehension. And the fourth one is holding what is not an established self to be an established self. And there are different explanations of that. We can hold the body to be an inherently existing body as an inherently existing phenomenon. That's according to the high school of thought. Or the low school of thought speak about holding that the person that is using the body is an established self, self-sufficient, substantially existing person is using this body. So in that sense, this body is an object of use, but a self-sufficient, substantially existing self. But anyway, these are the four erroneous apprehensions, and I mentioned them because these reflections that Shantideva presents here are really useful also to think of how we reduce these four erroneous apprehensions in meditating on true suffering, right? True suffering having the aspects of impermanence in the nature of suffering, empty and selfless. So before we continue to the next section, I wanted maybe just to read briefly what Khenpo Kumpen says in this commentary. He says, and specifically with regards to our state of mind, although we are not living in a channeling ground, luckily, it would be actually quite terrible to live in a channeling ground, or as yogis, actually, maybe it would have been wonderful to live in a channeling ground just to get a speedy access to realizations. It reminds me, by the way, that sometimes in some tantric practices, you have description of yogis that go to a channeling ground and do a chö practice. Some of you might have heard this practice chö. I think that there is a common mispronunciation of that word in Tibetan. Some people call it chod, because that's a transliteration in Tibetan, but in Tibetan you actually pronounce it as chö. So you have description of chö where yogis go into a cemetery, into a channeling ground with a big drum and a trumpet that is made of a bone and do a chö practice. And I met actually here in previous years when I came to Chenrezig Institute, a few people that used to do it here in local cemeteries. And I thought it's a bit over the top. I mean, you can be weird as Buddhists, but kind of going to cemeteries here in Australia with a drum and a trumpet is super weird. So no, I'm not convinced that we have to actually do that. I think that probably in most cases it's best to just be normal and not be weird about it. But anyway, the text says, we might well nourish the aspiration that on our occasional visits to such places, we might be able to regard our own living bodies as equal or the same to the corpses lying there, recently dead. or old and decomposed, as well as all the skeletons, remembering that our bodies too are subject to destruction in just the same way. This is how we should reflect on impermanence and upon the unclean nature of our bodies, and develop a determination to free ourselves from samsara. Normal is denying death. Is that what you're saying? No, I'm not saying that we should deny death. I'm just saying that probably if you go and visit a cemetery when there are kind of many non-Buddhist or kind of Christian people visit that cemetery, and you just sit in cemetery, or someone finds you actually at night sitting in a cemetery with a drum and a trumpet, here in Australia, I think that probably it's going a bit strange. But certainly we shouldn't deny our own death. So, then it says, when we look at corpses, blue and rotting, we should reflect that they were once owned and cherished, and that, like our own bodies now, they were unable to bear the heat, cold, and disease. We should consider that the corpses are like our own bodies. They're exactly the same kind of thing, and we need to remember that. However alive they may seem now, however much we cherish them, and however much they are sensitive to illness and the extremes of heat and cold, our bodies are at no time different in nature from corpses that we see. We should call to mind that our bodies are just the same as corpses, and we should meditate and become accustomed to this idea. So cemeteries are beautiful places and are nice to visit. Why is holding a ritual in a ceremony so weird? I think that it's very, very contextual. So indeed, it's nice to visit cemeteries in Australia, and they are beautiful, but my comment was just kind of being weird as a Buddhist practitioner doing kind of your tantric practices open to the public in a non-Buddhist environment in Australia. I think that's about it. We don't need to read too much into it. I think that's just kind of, at least my attitude to that, and it's not kind of, this is my own idea. I think that probably in a place like that, just be normal, don't be weird. Anyway, I hope that I'm not offending anyone. I mean, certainly we can visit cemeteries, but I think that probably our reflections, in most cases, can be kept to ourselves rather than displaying some weird stuff. Chanted grounds and cemeteries, chanted grounds and cemeteries are vastly different places in Didi. So then it says, discerning the antidotes to being attached to those dear to you. And we have 3 points in that. Attachment to those dear to you is unreasonable, and the reason for that. So what I thought of doing in relation to this part is connecting it up with the reflection on the 6 types of suffering that Lama Tsongkhapa explains in his Lamrim Chenmo. So when he speaks about developing the determination to live cyclic existence, he presents the meditation on the 8 types of suffering, which are universal suffering, the suffering of birth, sickness, aging, and death, looking for something and not being able to find it, coming across with what causes us displeasure and having to be separated from what causes us pleasure, and then the suffering of the aggregates, the contaminated, appropriated aggregates. Then he explains the 6 types of suffering, which are things like, rather than the usual explanation or the one that we're used to of the 6 realms of existence, he mentions the sufferings of ascending or descending from high to low, suffering of uncertainty, suffering of insatiability, of discarding bodies again and again and taking a birth again and again, and doing it all alone, having no companionship. So in the Lamrim Chenmo, Lama Tsongkhapa speaks about it in order to develop renunciation. And in order to develop renunciation, the determination to live, we need to curb down our attachment. So I think that looking at what Lama Tsongkhapa says, we can use that again in order to inform our meditation here with respect to what Shantideva mentions. So the 2 points here. Attachment to those dear to you is unreasonable, and the reasons for that. Did I close the file? Maybe I closed the file. All right. So it says, although this body arose as a unit, the bones and flesh with which it was born will break up and separate. What need is there to mention other friends? Khenpo Kumpen says, this body of ours this body of ours now seemed so whole and entire, which was born from a mother's womb. This flesh and bone that life has knit together will fall apart. When we die, it will disintegrate. This being so, there is no need to add that in human relationships, friends will depart from friends, relation from relation. We should indeed remember that everything that is now united will finally separate. So it seems to me that there are a couple of points that we can draw from this section. So it says, first of all, although this body arose as a unit, the bones and flesh with which it was born will break up and separate. So I think that we can link this part up not only with the conventional nature of the body, is that it is made of different parts, and at some point these parts will break apart. But also we have an apprehension of the body as if it is an inherently existing phenomenon, an objective phenomenon that exists objectively. And as such, part of objective existence, one of the features is that it exists in and of itself in a concrete way, as if it is a solid unit, indivisible, which exists in and of itself. So I think that we can link up the beginning of this verse, which says that this body seems as a unit, but actually it is broken into different parts. And definitely when we die, it will break into different parts. So that's also a reflection, I think, that it's slightly related to the ultimate nature of the body. So what need is there to mention other friends? Yeah, so not only it will happen to our body, but it will also happen to our friends. At birth, I was born alone, and at death, too, I shall die alone. If the suffering doom cannot be taken on by others, of what use are hindering friends? As Geshe said today, we are born alone and we die alone, in a sense that when we are born in our mother's womb, we are nourished by our mother. But when you look at the explanation of the sufferings that a baby experiences, or a fetus experiences, a baby developing in the mother's womb and also being born, of course, there's a lot of care that goes into the nourishing of a baby, but the subjective experience of pain and terror and discomfort and so forth is a baby is alone to carry. And I think that also now for us, as Geshe said, someone hits you, something bites you, there's a sensation of pain, and someone might try to soothe you or to support you, but still the actual sensation of pain is only for you to bear. So you also experience suffering in that sense completely alone. Of course, we might be supported by others, so it's not that we are completely alone, but in terms of the subjective experience of suffering, we are alone. We cannot pass on the suffering to others. And then when we die alone, we die without companions. Is, in our reflection on death, at the time of death, nothing will be of help apart from the Dhamma. So as I said, I wanted to link it up with Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo, where it speaks of the 6th type of suffering. So it's in the first volume. When you look at table of contents, after the attitude of person of small capacity, when we begin with a persons of medium capacity, we reflect on the 8 types of sufferings and then the 6 types of suffering. So we have the suffering of uncertainty, of insatiability, casting bodies repeatedly, the suffering of repeated birth, the suffering of the fault of repeatedly descending from high to low, and the fault of having no companion. So let's just mention a couple of points that, or read through a couple of points that Lama Tsongkhapa mentions, because I think that we can use that to supplement what Shantideva teaches in relation to those points. So the fault of uncertainty. As you pass through cyclic existence, close relatives such as your father and mother become enemies in other lifetimes, while enemies become close relatives. Similarly, your father becomes your son, and your son your father, and your mother becomes your wife, and your wife your mother. Since there is nothing but a succession of such transformations, there is nothing that you can count on. So in the same way, you can say that there is, with a sense of attachment, we think that there's no way that I could be happy without those who are close to my heart. There's no, as Krishna said, some people think that they cannot not continue in this life without the people that are close to the heart. But then if we supplement that with what Lama Tsongkhapa says here, actually the ones that are close to your heart might have been your enemies before, or they might turn into your enemies in the future. The nature of relationship change. Your father become your son become your father, your wife become your mother becomes your wife, and so forth. And therefore, there's no point in holding on to those beings with a sense of attachment, since there is no certainty with respect to those relationships from one lifetime to the next. Then the fault of insatiability. So Nagarjuna says in his friendly letter, each of us drank more milk than would fill the 4 oceans. Yet there's those in cyclic existence who act as ordinary beings are intent on drinking still more than that. So think about it. Each living being drinks so much mother's milk in the past, and yet without training on a path of liberation, will drink that much again in the future. So I think that here, with the suffering of insatiability, Lama Tsongkhapa, in drawing from Nagarjuna, is speaking about milk, but I think that just as well, when we think of how in our relationship with others, or also with respect to possessions and so forth, we have so many relationships with others. We've had relationship in this life, in previous lifetime. Many of them were so enjoyable. And there is the fault of insatiability. We've done it before, and we'll still do it in the future without finding long-lasting happiness, without finding ultimate happiness. It's not to say that there is no pleasure or comfort in happiness, but still, I guess that we can recognize the fault of insatiability. Then the fault of casting off bodies repeatedly. So this is, I think, relevant to, we can supplement that with the reflection that we spoke of today, what we find in Channel Ground. So each of us have left a pile of bones that would dwarf Mount Meru. So thinking of the bodies that we've already cast and what we find on Channel Grounds. So we think that our body is not different to that, but we can also add to that we've done it so many times before, so many skeletons, so many atoms, so many molecules, so many liquids and smells and so forth that were not necessarily attractive. And we will continue to do that. So what's the point in being attached to the body, to our body and the body of others? The fault of repeated rebirth. That's also, I think, it's quite straightforward. If you look for the limit of mothers by counting the earthen pallets the size of juniper berries, the earth would not suffice. Then it says the fault of repeatedly descending from high to low, from high rebirth to low rebirth. And the last one is the fault of having no companions. So in this way, you will come to grief. Therefore, take light from the lamp of the 3 types of merit. Otherwise, you'll go alone into endless darkness that neither sun nor moon can penetrate. It says, you will come to grief means know that you must die, as I've indicated before, and take the light of merit. The three types of merit refer to either physical, verbal, and mental virtue, or to the three foundations from which merit arises, generosity and so forth. I'm not totally clear about what those three foundations are from where merit arises, maybe related to the three trainings, I'm not really sure. And then endless darkness refers to the darkness of ignorance. So altogether, I think that we can use also what Lama Tsongkhapa says here, just in terms of finding faults in samsara, to just as well say that these are the faults of attachment that causes us to chase after bodies, our own body and the bodies of others in samsara, and finding no satisfaction in that. So let's see if there's something else to add from Khenpo Kumpa's commentary. He says, we are born alone. We come into the world. Alone we come to the world, and when we die, we will go forth alone. The root of all the sufferings of the three worlds of samsara lies in birth and death. No one is able to share in the suffering we feel when we are born and when we die. None of our intimate companions are able to experience it and take it upon them. We are the only ones to feel it. Therefore, of what avail are our relatives and friends who create obstacles to our virtuous practice of ethical discipline, to our learning and study, and to the approach and accomplishment phases of our practice in retreat, which means the generation and completion stages. Such relationships are by no means indispensable. And as Geshe pointed out, it's not that we don't need anyone around us. It's what we don't need is relationships which are based on attachment. So, for example, you might have friends and family members that support your practice. If you go on long-term retreat and you have friends or family that support you, of course, we need them. But then to what avail are friends and relationships? Here refers to, I think that we need to take it, to understand it in the context of what we use it there for friends and relatives with a sense of attachment that brings up a constant sense of disappointment, dooms us to disappointment. So I'm wondering if you have any questions. I think that I ran out of points that I wanted to mention today. Any questions or points that you wanted to bring up?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Dachin.
Hey, Dachin, how are you?
I'm very well, and yourself and everybody else there? Regards to everybody in the Gompa?
Well, we have one person at the Gompa now, and I think that you're doing well, right? All right, she's all right.
And who is that?
I think that it's Georgie.
Oh, Georgie! Good on you, Georgie.
I think that, you know, Dachin, when you come back, you have to crack a whip and get everyone back to the Gompa. I think that it's like everyone is kind of feel a bit loose because you're not here around now.
Yeah, oh, yeah, right. Sure. So look, I've just, I mean, I must admit, I've been really enjoying the teachings, and I think the reason why he's going so slowly is because this is just such a critical. It really is so critical, the level of our attachment. And you know, you're probably aware of the situation that I'm in down here with my son, and of course the attachment to son, and that goes on to family, and you know, you've talked about that even last week too, that they can really sort of distract us within our practice. And I think in some ways, you being in Australia and your family being in Israel really is a very fortunate position for you, Yaki, because it does decrease that you know, out of sight, out of mind to some extent. There is something to be said for that. But you know, I guess just going through what you have brought up, which I think I'm really grateful, is that the fault of having no companions. Can we talk about that a little bit?
The fault of having no companions, then?
Yeah, that's the sixth fault that you have brought up.
Yeah.
So I mean, we do need to have companions, but it's like having Dharma companions, not people who we are attached to, but people who are like-minded and supporting us with our practice. Is that's sort of is what it's talking about, of not having companions. We do want to have companions, people who are supporting us with our practice.
I think, yeah, we do need to have companions that support us, but also we want to be supportive of others. So you mentioned, for example, that we have family. I think that we can call it family obligations. If we have people in a family that we need to take care of, and definitely, I think that as a parent, you still. I think that most people, when they're parents, think that it's hard to have a constant. How to avoid having a constant sense of care for your child. So it's hard to kind of just cut and go, or to think that now I'm just going to practice the Dharma and see you, bye-bye. So we have a sense of, others care for us and we care for others. But I think that probably there comes a time where if you want to go into deeper in your practice and you think that, well, now in order to support a deeper level of practice, I need to create physical and mainly mental isolation. The most important thing is mental isolation. Then we need to find ways to reduce our sense of attachment. So we still need support from others, but it just as well could be the case that others need our support. So for example, Venerable Tsultrim, Carla Pierce from Turmeric Institute, she went to India to do a long-term retreat. The plan was to do a 3-year retreat. And a few months after she started the retreat, her son started to experience some personal difficulties, and fearing for his own welfare, she just ended the retreat rather than doing 3-year retreat. She just ended it after a few months, came back to Australia to take care of her son, and because there was no one else to do it. And it seems that now this idea of long-term retreat just have to be on the back burner, to be left on the back burner until situation changes. It could take years. So I'm saying that because I think that if you want to do an in-depth long-term retreat, sometimes you have to make compromises. Sometimes reality presents you with challenges, and you might have to think that, well, in order to protect the life of someone, this is what I need to do. Like Venerable Tsultrim, she had to protect the life of her son. So rather than doing long-term retreat, she chose to do that. So I think that you could say that probably it's part of our obligations to others. So we are supported by others, but we also need to support others. But then we also have relationships which are based on needing to be in close contact with others. And that's kind of when I'm speaking of relationships which are based on attachment. In that if I'm not going to see them for a long time, I will not be happy. If they're not going to see me for a long time, maybe they will not like me anymore. I don't feel that it's good for them not to see me with that sense of attachment for a long time. So I think that this type of relationship we can work with, try to reduce that sense of attachment if we want to do more in-depth or long-term practice. But also in general, I think that as Dharma practitioners, when we try to apply the Dhamma to our life on a daily basis, probably those areas are good to also address, because the more we reduce our attachment in our personal relationships with friends and family, I think that the more we find room for working with our mind in our Dhamma practice. And also the more we can turn those relationships to be meaningful. I think that any relationship that is based on genuine sense of concern would be more meaningful than one that is based on attachment. Within the family unit, it's harder. I mean, it's hard to avoid relationship with your family members that is not based on attachment. That's the way it is. As Geshe said today, we are attached to our parents, but also we have also a sense of concern for the welfare in terms of the future lives and so forth. And I think that the same thing can be said with respect to our brothers and sisters and cousins and so forth. We might be connected to them because they are a family, but we can also be concerned for them in terms of cultivating, wanting them to cultivate virtue and also to be well in future lifetimes.
I mean, I think I don't know. I'm not quite sure whether I'm thinking along the same way that you're thinking about family. But my family is such that there's a very clear division in my family where half of it's spiritual and half is not spiritual. And it's really difficult to maintain a relationship with the spiritual half and with the non-spiritual half. And I think they feel the same way about the spiritual half. Like, you know, we are family, we love each other because we are family, but yet we are very different. And I think to have any, and I've certainly learned over the years that my expectations and my level are based on my attachment to that side of the family are always comes up short. I'm always disappointed. And, you know, I think they would say the same about me. They don't say stuff or do stuff with me because it's probably going to be the wrong thing. You know, like we can't satisfy each other. Doesn't matter how hard we want to or we try, it's just not possible. And, you know, at this stage in my life, that seems to be also becoming the situation with my own kids. You know, as much as I love them, it's the way we think and the way we are in the world is very different, and we both come up short with our capacity to be appropriate with each other. And so our attachments are only our level of attachment, we are always disappointed. And, you know, at this stage in my life, as you know, wanting to make some progress towards karma, you know, like I'm really embracing Shanti Deva and what he's encouraging us to do, and I think it really provides my level of my attachments within my family, and the experiences that I've been aware of for so many years now, and that which we all have our own family experiences and just the unsatisfactoriness of it. You know, very common thing, you know, as an aged care nurse, saw it all the time, is that I think as Buddhists, it really becomes an opportunity for us to look at the nature of our relationships, the emptiness of our relationships. I mean, I was really, I sort of hooked into Cherub's, Venerable Cherub's relationship, Venerable Cherub's meditation this morning. And it was a really profound meditation on trying to establish what is real, and particularly around our relationships and our attachments. And yeah, you know, I think Shanti Deva is really encouraging us to look at the benefit of our attachments to family, to friends. And, you know, I thought Geshe-la's comment today about when his father died, he hopes his father would have a good rebirth. But when his teacher died, he wanted to see him again. Like, yeah, you know, that's a pretty stark difference in, you know, your teacher you want to see again, your father, you can just have a positive rebirth. Like, you know, I found that a really interesting. You really need to think about these attachments.
Well, you know, with my brothers and sister, now I see them, of course, seldom because we live on different continents. So we, you know, whenever I visit Israel, or whenever my brother travels overseas and we are in close proximity, we try to meet. And it always strikes me that we are friends and we get along because we have genetic history, or exactly. Also history as kids. But yeah, in terms of having common values or things that, or common way of thinking, we're totally different. And
yep,
there would be nothing, or there's nothing that actually connects us now apart from history. But still, whenever I see them, I'm happy. I'm happy to kind of see them. I'm happy to have food with them. I'm happy to spend some stories, you know, to share some stories with them. They tell me about their life. But then when my visit is done and dusted, when I move on and they move on, I'm quite happy to move on. I feel that I had enough without that sense of attachment. So it happens, and sometimes we, I think, lament that our relationship is not as close as before, or not not as meaningful as before, but maybe before it was more based on attachment.
Very much, yeah. And I think many families seen as an obligation these days.
Yeah.
We do the Christmas, we do all of that sort of, because it's a family obligation. It's not because we want to or it's even enjoyable, but because it's an obligation. It's a societal expectation.
Yeah, but I think I kind of know if there's such an obligation and you're taking part of that in that, I think that there's also ways to make that obligation at least not an obligation of suffering. Kind of, you can actually enjoy it and then move on. Yeah,
a short visit is a good visit, Yaki. That's what I've always said. Short visit is a good visit.
Yeah. I'm wondering, there is a Zoom user that put their hand up. Is that a question or? Maybe not. It was accidental. All right. Anyway, it seems our time is up. So thank you very much, people.
Thank you.
And I agree with you, Dechen, also kind of, I really like the slow pace of Geshe-la's teaching. I've studied this text before, and before we had sessions where we cover 20 verses, 30 verses. So having the chance to reflect upon the meaning of some of the verses and also to connect them with other texts and make them rich is a really precious opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you so much for all the effort you put into, Venerable. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you for being there.
Yeah, I'm here. We need each other, you and I.
By the way, when are you getting back?
I don't know, not soon enough.
All right. I'm asking my question. Just take it easy.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
All right, let's do the dedication first.
Okay.
Due to this version, I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transmigratory beings without exception to that state. May the precious Supreme Bodhisattva not yet born arise. May that a reason not incline, but increase more and more. In this land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Jin residents in Gyasa, please remain until samsara ends. You uphold the subduer's moral way, yourselves in the body for bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine. Who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers only in the three jewels, protective of myself and others, your disciples, please live long.
Thanks, Gartson.
Thank you very much. Hey, Graham.
Hi, mate.
Are you in Sydney or up here?
Yeah, still. I'm coming up on Tuesday. My wife and I are coming up next Tuesday, so I might pop out and see you guys sometime next week. But I'll try and get onto that test. I'm a bit slack at the moment. I've been terribly slack, so I'll try and get onto that tonight. And,
as slack as you are, Graham. So are you safe at Sydney?
I'm still in Sydney at the moment. Yeah, my place down here.
So commuting down to the shop with a kayak or longboat?
Yeah, it's a bit raining and wet, miserable down here at the moment, unfortunately. Yeah, but usually it's okay. But yeah, the weather's been terrible for the last week. Yeah, pretty flooding. How's it up in Queensland? Is it bad up there?
Pissing rain.
You're getting rain too? Yeah, it's just been terrible. Really windy today, rain, and it's just not very good at all. But anyway, see you next week, Venerable.
See you next week.